We are joined in studio by Indianapolis Motor Speedway pace car enthusiast and auto historian as well, Tom Benvie. Tom, welcome to the show. How are you tonight?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
And let's jump right into things. Tell us a little bit. First off, I would say how'd you catch the racing bug, but how'd you catch the automotive repair bug?
I guess when my dad would be working on the cars, I was the oldest son. I was out there with him, and his enthusiasm wore off on me. Probably a little bit too much, but yeah, I love cars.
Tell us a little bit about how this whole interest, or, you know, I'm sure the word will come to me, but the passion of the Indianapolis pace cars really came about.
I guess if I could start at the very beginning of Indianapolis, there was a guy named Carl Fisher. I call him the most important person in America no one ever heard of. But he was out in Indianapolis, and he and his partner, James Allison, they patented the Prestolite acetylene lamp, which was before electric lights. And they made them for just about every single car made. And they sold it at the time for $9 million, and this is in 1908. So that was like $240 million nowadays.
Wow.
And he decided that being a wealthy man, he was going to work on some of the things he had a passion for. And one of them was a road. He helped pioneer and engineer the Lincoln Highway that actually went from New York to San Francisco. And he's also the very first auto dealership in the country. A lot of times, they'd have a car in a showroom, you went in and you ordered it, but he actually had Olds and Packard and Rio and started Dayton and some others, and he had them right there. You could go in and buy it and go home with it today. So he's the first to do that. So roads are important to him. So when he finished the Lincoln Highway, he made the Dixie Highway that went from Indianapolis down to Florida. And at the very end was Miami. And at the time, Miami was a swamp, so he remodeled that. He's the one who designed and sold all the lots for Miami Beach. And then he went up to Montauk, New York, to do the exact same thing. It was called Miami of the North. And his big passion was racing cars. And he raced cars, and he got hurt a number of times, and the tracks were all poor. And he saw a track in England that he really liked. It was a 2-mile oval, Brooklands, and had bank tracks. And he decided what better place than Indianapolis, because at the time, Indianapolis rivaled Detroit with making cars. They had the Duesenberg, Studebaker was nearby, the Stutz car. They just had a lot of manufacturers in Indianapolis. And he thought these companies could use it as a test track, and we could use it as a racetrack. So he got a couple of partners, and they built the Indianapolis 500 pace raceway, and it's 2.5-mile bank circle. And the very first race they had was such a disaster. It was in 1909 that they had to cut it short. They had 5 deaths. They had numerous injuries. The track was falling apart. He thought he had the best of the best material for the track, and it was just being torn apart and rutted. And so they decided to put bricks on it. So they put 3.2 million bricks on the track, which is why it's now known as the Brickyard. Right now there's only a 3-foot section where the start-finish line is. It's all been tarred over. But then they held a race that Memorial Day, a 500-mile race, hugely successful. A Marmon Wasp was the winner, and the museum still owns that car. It's at the racetrack. But it was born. Memorial Day weekend was now the Indy 500.
Have you ever gotten to go to the Indy 500?
I have not yet. It is on my bucket list.
Oh, my goodness.
My wife has no desire to go, but I do, and maybe this year I might make it. They had a pace car reunion a few years ago, but I wasn't able to go to that. But, yeah, it's something I will be doing.
Talk to us a little bit, some myths, per se, of Indianapolis pace cars. That's kind of where we decided the conversation was going to go.
Well, the pace cars are very collectible, and at one time they would have them in the dealership, so they would use it for advertising, like come and see the 1953 Ford, the pace car, and starting in 1953, Ford actually made replicas. So you would not only get to see a 53 Ford, you would see a yellow one with the Continental kit in the back, and it was leaded on the side. And then in 54, Dodge did it, and 56, DeSoto did it, and they're all special cars. And it caught everyone's attention. And then when I was growing up, it certainly caught my attention to see these cars traveling around. And then if you're around in the mid-'70s, they were garish as can be. They had a Buick Century that was white, but the whole side was this red and blue mural with a, like an eagle, and it was out there. And then, so people got to see these cars, and they made a decent amount. In 1980, they made 10,000 Trans Am replicas, so just about anyone could ever see them. So they have become very collectible, and some way more than others. So at the time, they would actually send cars to the track. And there was a group out in Indianapolis in 1958. They called themselves the 500 Festival Associates. And they felt, all these people are going to the track, but they're not coming to downtown. And, 250,000 people right there, and they're not coming to shop downtown. So why don't we put some events on to get them to come shop? So they formed the 500 Festival Associates, and the first thing they did is plan a parade, which still goes on today, and it's right up there with the Rose Bowl and Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. There's 33 drivers in the race, so they had 33 marching bands, 33 floats, 33 performers, 33 celebrities, and the parade was 2.5 miles long, which is the length of the track. So they really tied everything together, and it was a huge success. And then one of the local car dealers thought, we have these celebrities, and they just find in convertibles to put them in. I'm going to put them in Buicks with my name on the side. So he gave them 25 Buicks to use for the parade. And then when they came back, he just sold them to the regular public. But in 1960, a guy named Charles Stewart, he had a couple of dealerships out there. He decided he was going to flood the market with these white Olds 98s or Olds 88s. So they're all convertibles.
One of my first cars.
Really?
Yeah, I had an old an 88.
Wow, well,
yeah.
They were built for a long time. They were one of the longest nameplates. So he flooded the place. He sent 126 Oldsmobiles, and each of the 33 directors of the 500 Festival got a car with their name on the side, and then the governor got one, the lieutenant governor, the mayor, the local police chiefs, dignitaries, radio people, and then they had some pool cars for celebrities that might have showed up, and they were used in the parade, and so they're called festival cars. Oh. Well, now they're called parade cars, but at the time they were called festival cars, and they seem to have a premium that the collectors want. They want to know if their car was literally at Indianapolis, and there are some lists that were put together so they could keep track of the cars. The earliest list that is known is from 1970, and I have most of them from 70 to date. So I can tell you if the car was at the track, and we're reconstructing 67, 8, and 9. So those cars, have an edge on some of the other ones. But then when they make one, probably the biggest splash was 1978. It was the first time the Corvette was made. Mm-hmm. And it was a special black and silver one. And it became so popular that the dealers were asking double the sticker price. People were buying them and putting them away because it's going to be worth something. And as a result, there are so many 1978 Corvettes out there with less than 10 miles on them that has no premium. Over one with 30 miles or 100 miles or 3,000 miles. It's all about condition. And some of them were stored quite poorly. But the interesting thing about 1978, they only sent 4 cars to the track. So they had 3. They had the pace car and then 2 backups and the display car. And everybody, I think my car was one of the ones at the track. It's like, no, they had Monte Carlos and Camaros at the track. So that's a huge myth. Everybody who has one of these 78 pace cars, the person selling it is like, that's an original track car, so I never drove it. Well, it has 10 miles on it. If it was an original track car, it'd have at least 300 or 400. So that's probably the biggest myth. And that, plus all pace cars are collectible. They're not. Some people, I have Cadillac Elantes that really were at the track, and it got the lettering down the side, and they say first thing I'd do is take that lettering off the car. that's a myth right there that they're highly collectible.
Yeah.
So how do they? Growing up in the '80s, I used to see the official pace car, like you're talking about, and that '78 Corvette is a cool looking car. But how do they go about picking what car, what year, what manufacturer?
Well, the first number of years they picked a Indianapolis based company, so they had the start of Dayton, which was really from Ohio, but that was the main seller that Carl Fisher has. But then they had the Stutz, they had the Cole, the Premier, the National. They were all cars, Duesenberg, Studebaker, all cars made in Indianapolis. And then they kind of got away from that and started highlighting cars that had some feature on it that you hadn't really seen before. So, the 64 Mustang, for instance, was a huge hit, and no one had ever seen a car like that before. They made so many, I forget what the numbers are, but they had like a 6 months back order in the first week. So they were very selective of how they picked the cars. A LaSalle might have been picked because it had the big V8, and it was the first time for that.
But they picked something that was kind of racy, right? Was that the?
Yeah, they were almost always convertibles. There's only a couple instances where they weren't. They picked a Studebaker Champion because it was supposed to be a nice family car, and plus it was from Indiana. But it was a family car with a new engine and safety, and so they picked that as a hardtop. But nowadays they have kind of a strange policy. At one time, everybody would be making engines and racing an Indy, making the engines for the car. But now the only two that are making the engines are Honda and Chevrolet. So the Indy people finally said, if you're not going to make an engine for the race, we're not going to pick you to be a pace car. So the last non-Chevrolet was 1996. It was the Viper. But every car after that has been Chevrolet. And, of course, as the cars get faster, the pace cars have to get faster. So, the Camaro might be a great fast car, but not fast enough to pace the race. So now it's been Corvettes. So since 97, it's been Chevrolet. Or General Motors, because some of the Oldsmobiles get in there. But now it's Corvettes because they don't have to do much modifications to pace the race. And, it's no big surprise when the Corvette's got to be announced. It's like, I wonder what color it's got to be, white and what else. And, sometimes they've had some strange ones. They had a purple car with yellow stripes and yellow wheels back in 95. The 98 was kind of a purple-pink color. But now they're more sedate. And at one time also they would supply, like I said, 250 vehicles to the track because it wasn't just the festival cars. They supplied cars and trucks and all sorts of vehicles. So it wasn't uncommon to have 250 vehicles there. And then finally it's like, that's just way too much. And the cars are in the Cincinnati zone in case of Chevrolet. And they get sold through the Cincinnati zone, so most of them stay around the Indianapolis area. But, if you have 200 cars that are very similar, it's kind of hard to sell them all. So they finally got it down where they supply the trucks, GMC if it's Chevrolet, but if it's not Chevrolet, then Chevrolet if it is. But they supply the trucks for the safety patrol and the fire patrol. And then 55 has been going festival cars for the last number of years. And then the festival cars get sold. You don't almost always stay around Indiana. Every once in a while, a dealer down south might get one, but you never get to see them around here. And it's too bad because, like you said as a kid, you remember seeing them driving around.
Oh, yeah.
You don't see them driving around anymore unless you're out in Indianapolis area.
So, speaking of driving around, you have a particular favorite pace car, I believe, and I believe you might have a few, or you have had possession of a few of these cars. Tell us a little bit about it.
Well, in 1992, they selected the Cadillac Alante to be the pace car, and the Cadillac Alante was just this expensive car. You could buy like 2 Corvettes for the price of a loaded Alante, and they actually made the Alante body in Italy. And then they flew it back on a 747 to Detroit, and then they put the drivetrain in it. And in 93, they came out with a North Star engine, which was like state-of-the-art. No one ever saw anything like this before. It was an incredible engine. And unfortunately, in 95, they made some modifications of the engine and promptly ruined it. So
they overheated.
Oh, yeah, terribly.
Yeah.
But people say, I never buy a Alante with a North Star. It's like, wrong year. 95 and up maybe.
It all overheat.
Yeah, 93 and 94, they're great engines. So they actually stopped production of the 92 Elante to make the 93s to send to the track because this is the 92 race. So they sent 38 93 Elantes and 56 92 Elantes out to be used at the track. And I have one 93 and two of the 92s, and also a Cadillac Seville. They made 20 of them for the Cadillac officials out there. So I managed that. And I had an Eldorado, but I moved and I don't have my garage anymore, so I couldn't bring them all with me.
Do the winners of the race still get a replica of the car nowadays?
Well, that's interesting. You go back to 1936, and a former winner was Tommy Milton, and he worked for Packard at the time. And Packard was going to be the pace car, 36 Packard. And he said, I'll tell you what, I'll be the pace car driver, but you got to give the car to the winner. And they said, what a great idea. So they did. And unfortunately, the winner let a relative take the car during World War II, and they probably totaled it, so the car is gone. But it was a yellow Packard Roadster. And so that's another myth. The tradition, so everybody thinks, is the winner gets the pace car. But they didn't. In 1946, for instance, they built just a hand-built Lincoln, and Henry Ford wanted it, Henry Ford II. So he took it, and they gave the winner a painting. But unfortunately, the winner was killed, and he never got the painting. In 1942, they had a specially built Chrysler Newport Brougham. They made 5 of them. All 5 still exist, but there was no way the winner was going to get one of those. 1948, they had a Nash, and Nash was enjoying the publicity so much that they had all the drivers sign the car, and then they toured the country with it. Cannonball Baker toured the country with it. And one of his stunts that he did is he would have the police close down roads, and he would fly through the streets going through red lights and stop signs, and they would time him. And then he would do it in normal traffic just to show you don't have to go through the red lights and stop signs because you're not going to save any time. And then the car disappeared. It was last seen a couple of years later. In 1950... The winner got the Mercury pace car. He had it for 6 months, went to a car wash, and the power windows caught fire and burned, so that didn't last. In 1953, everybody thinks Bill Vukovich got the pace car, but it's still in the Henry Ford Museum, and it's not on display, which I find kind of odd. It's not something they rotate through, but they still have it. And then lately, they were giving the drivers one of the festival cars. But if you race for Roger Penske, he has on the contract that if you win, I get the car. But I'll give you something else comparable. So I'll either give you another festival car. He has multiple car dealerships, so you either get a festival car or you get, something else you might want. So if the festival car is a Camaro and you're the winner, you say I want a Corvette, fine. I'm keeping the Camaro, but so Roger Penske, I forget how many races he's won, 17 maybe?
It sounds pretty close.
But he has a museum with all the cars in there for the festival cars or the pace cars that he's won. And then others, like in 1975, Alonso was the winner, and they were going to give him a festival car, and they were going to use the pace car at the Pikes Peak. And in the still of the night, he took the pace car.
So my gosh.
He
stole the pace car.
Yeah, he did. He still has it in his collection. And he also has the 93 Elante pace car in his collection. And I believe he has a 94 Mustang car in his collection. When he won, he demanded the actual pace car.
Wow.
But then you go to 1964, A.J. Foyt won, and they gave him the Mustang, and it didn't have a power top. And he said, I'm not taking it. And there's all sorts of myths around. He couldn't get out of the parking lot, and it was raining. He couldn't put the top up. But if you look at the weather at that time, that was all untrue. He just didn't want the car. He wanted one specially made for him, and it didn't have air conditioning either. He lived in Texas. So Ford begrudgingly said, okay, we'll make you a special one. And it wasn't even white or like a pace car. It was just a regular Mustang. And then in 67, damned if he doesn't do it again. He wins the race. The pace car is this beautiful 67 Camaro. No power top, no air conditioning. And he says, no, I'm not taking it. I want something else. So General Motors said, okay, the pace car has a 396 cubic inch engine. You're not getting one with that engine. We'll make you one you want, but it's got to have a 350 engine. So starting in the next year in 68, the car company said, we're going to put a special car together for the winner. So it might not be the pace car, it might be the pace car, but it's going to be a special car that's called the winner's car. It's going to be in a podium, and we're not going to put up with this nonsense from the last two. So the last person who got an actual pace car was Al Unser, got 93 when he won in 92, and then Emerson Fittipaldi got one in 89. But for the most part, lately they're all either a festival car or a car that the winner wanted, and get that instead.
Interesting.
Oh yes, so sorry, I was mesmerized by the Al Unser stealing the cars. So do you research these cars and you keep a log of them and find out where they are and stuff,
actually,
right?
I've been commissioned to write a book on them, which more work than I could ever possibly imagine, trying to get through these myths. And whenever I finish a year, I start a Facebook group. So I might have like the 1992 Indy 500 pace car Facebook group, and then I send it out and I try to contact all the enthusiasts in the clubs or something, and I post and say, let me know if there's any corrections have to be made or if you have anything to add. And it's been very helpful because, sometimes there's minor things that they want corrected, or a case in point, in 1969, they had two Camaro pace cars. One had Firestone tires and one had Goodyear tires. And the proposal was that whoever won the pole position, whatever tires are on that car, were the pace car. So Goodyear won with a pole position, and it became the pace car. So, they wanted something like that included. And then other people, and I expose myths like, you say there's only 190 made, but I already have 600 that are documented, and they don't like hearing that. But for the most part, the Facebook groups have been very helpful, and I have most of them completed up to 1995. So if you just go on Facebook and say Indianapolis 500 pace car and pick a year, the group will be there.
No kidding. That's cool.
That's a lot of work.
Yeah, that's a lot of chronological time, I'm sure. As we've really only begun to scratch the surface here with Tom Benvie tonight. Tom has obviously done his research and is a wealth of knowledge when it comes to pace cars, but Tom is also, I believe, many different vehicles you've really grown fond of over the years. And Tom comes into our shop and tells us many stories, and I told him, I said, we got to have you on, and this won't be the last appearance Tom comes in for, I'm sure, as we are on a time tonight. Miles on Motorsports 95.9 WATD.